Remember that scene at the end where he's eating like live shrimp?
Yes.
I was
trying to think what
I
I've seen
don't
a lot
know
of
that
stuff in
dish.
Hong Kong. I haven't seen that one. No.
And
I
and that
love the
was
line where it talks about Kowloon Tong being the lively place. Like my
yeah.
office in Kowloon Tong. It's a nice area, but I wouldn't say, oh, that's the happening place in Hong Kong.
Hello and welcome. My name is James Marsh, and I'm joined as ever by my friend Steve Hackman. This episode, we are talking Cheng Er's Hidden Blade.
Hey, but you know the drill. Subscriptions really help grow the channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, it'd be a great favor to us if you went ahead and hit that subscribe button. While you're there, ding the little bell next to it. And that way you're notified every time we release a new review. And just as a reminder, we do spoilers here, so you've been warned. And by the way, James, today I'm drinking a little sipping tequila. That is my drink of choice.
Nice. Unfortunately, I'm only drinking water. I need to do something later, so sorry. I can pretend this is all
what this is film. This is you can make it whatever you want. It's gin.
What's that Chinese wine called?
Baijiao.
Yeah. So I could pretend this is a big glass of baijiao, but it isn't. So we are talking Hidden Blade, which is in its simplest form a 1940s set cloak and dagger spy thriller set in mostly in Shanghai. It follows director He, played by Tony Leung, who is a Chinese collaborator working with the Japanese Imperial Army, reporting directly to General Watanabe, played by Hiroyuki Mori. Also, by his side is his cousin, who is sort of the main local politician there as well. So they are tasked, among other things, with rooting out communist resistance fighters in and around the city. He has a couple of pretty effective underlings, one of which played by Wang Yibo. But as this movie spans a number of years, you get a number of different sort of cases, a number of different sort of incidents take place. I would say chief among them is director He's interrogation of a resistance fighter called Zhang, who surrenders. And so he has to sit him down, and interrogate him, and work out what his deal is about. You've got Ye and his partner Wang are tasked with investigating the potential killing in action of a member of the Japanese royal family out there in sort of Nanjing, or around that area. And then also Ye has he runs into a former flame, his former fiance, actually played by Zhang Jingyi, who is now a communist, and he is faced with something of a moral dilemma as to what to do about that. So, Steve, Hidden Blade.
Yeah, no, this was, I love the whole tone of this film. I love the noir setting. Shanghai really lends itself to this kind of a film, this cloak and dagger, especially, 1940s. There's all this kind of skullduggery going on. At times I found it was a little confusing because you had the Japanese and the communists, but you also have the Kuomintang in there as well. And so there's kind of a triumvirate of loyalties and agendas going on. And at times I had to stop for a moment and recalibrate who's siding with who, while fully acknowledging I was ready for a double and even a triple cross at the end, which of course is what eventually unravels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think added to that, the complexity of the story is the fact that Cheng chooses to tell the story out of chronological order. This is a non-linear structure, and you really have to keep your wits about you in order to sort of follow who is who and who is double crossing who and who is working with who. And I've got to be honest, if I have one complaint of the movie, it's that if it didn't have this non-linear construction, I think it would be far easier to follow, because it's actually a relatively straightforward plot.
Yes.
And I think that the payoffs in terms of the revelations over who is double crossing who and why and when are sufficiently revealing and thrilling in their own right, that this this non-linear structure almost detracts from it, because it makes it sort of a little too confusing for its own good, really. And I kind of actually wish that he'd just told it from A to B to C, because, you know, as I said, the payoffs are enough on their own.
Yeah. I'm glad you felt that way, because I felt a little stupid at times, thinking, wait a second, is this happening where? Because sometimes when things are told in a nonlinear fashion like this, the director or the filmmakers will have some visual cues to help you delineate what time frame we're in, a change of hairstyle, maybe a tint that's used in the lens to help convey these different. And yes, at times there would be some title cards to say what year things were happening, but still things were happening out of order. What? Oh, wait, this guy was killed, but he's alive now. Why is it? Oh, because this is flipped around. And when we use that nonlinear filmmaking device, it usually has a real good reason. Like this, it's happening because there's going to be this payoff that couldn't be done another way. But you don't really get that. It's almost like he just took, as you said, a straightforward movie, chopped it up, kind of switched some of the parts around at times, and we're left to kind of put the pieces back together.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, there are a number of shots that we see early on in the film of certain characters, you know, not least Tony Leung's characters, of staring ponderously out of a window, and you think you know what is going on in his head. But then by the time it circles back round and you see that sequence again at the end, you realize, oh, actually, it was kind of exactly the opposite was going through his head. You're like, sure, but that doesn't kind of have the dramatic punch you think it does, because when you show it to me completely devoid of any context, I don't know. I don't have any kind of idea what's going on in his head. He just looks like he's staring out the window with a lot on his mind. So, it's kind of a cheat. It's like when and I don't think it happens necessarily in this movie, but it's like in movies where they're like, you need to tell me now what the hell is going on, and then it just cuts to another scene, and you're like, well, and then when they cut back later, they haven't explained what was going on, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, what? In that moment when someone waves their finger in your face and goes, you've got to tell me what the hell is going on, you can't just cut away to something else.
Right.
As a way of avoiding answering the question. You know, real life doesn't work that way. And I found that, you know, there are a number of instances in this movie where he uses editing and non-linear storytelling, you know, in order to sort of make sort of potent emotional points that don't really sort of play out that way. I feel that, you know, and not least Zhou Xun's character, who plays Miss Chen, I think she falls foul of this problem, because she's quite an important character. You know, we do have spoilers in this show, so she's Director Her's partner, you know, romantic partner, but she seems to be, and she's the character who is being sort of grassed up by Zhang when he comes to surrender, but you only discover that quite late on in the movie, that's the reason why Director Her chose to do the interrogation himself, and is holding that character kind of almost prisoner, you know, when he's supposed to be sort of bringing him across, if you like.
Right.
The end result is that the Miss Chen character is kind of sidelined, and she becomes this sort of somewhat enigmatic presence where you don't really get to know her as a character so much as perhaps you might have done if they'd just told the story, you know, from beginning to end. I'm not saying that you reveal all the twists and turns. You know, I like the fact that, you know, I like a number of the reveals, and I like how it sort of the movie double crosses you in regards to sort of who is on what side. But I feel that poor Zhao Xun kind of falls through the cracks slightly. I'm sure that's true of other characters as well.
No, there's a subtlety in this film that I really like, but at times it could be so subtle you're left trying to figure out exactly what happened. Like at the beginning when Tony Leung is interrogating the guy, and he's being all sweet to him and nice, and Tony Leung's doing this whole I'm good cop thing. And then, you know, he's playing with the gun, and then later it cuts to him in the restaurant, and he's got blood on his shirt. And I'm thinking, oh, that's brilliant. I mean, I thought that was well done, but you are left kind of going, did that really happen? Did that happen? Because it's such a leap. It's definitely inferred, but you're kind of left filling a lot of the blank. I mean, he killed that guy, right? At the beginning?
Totally killed him.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he had to, because he had to protect he had to protect Miss Chen, because that was the woman he loved, you know.
Right, right. Again, that's where I'm still trying to connect. I really need to rewatch this a second time, knowing how this ends and then putting all the pieces together. Another subtlety point I wanted to bring up is even when Tony Leung's character is in there with Watanabe, and he's telling him, you need to learn to enjoy Japanese food more, and just communicating. You need to get on board with the persona that you're taking on. And there was some, I found, very interesting dialogue in this, that even with the translation, I found myself caught up in back and forth between the Japanese and the collaborators, and how much the collaborators are despised, and then how much the collaborators who are really communists must really hate the fact that they have to appear to everybody as collaborators when
Absolutely.
they're really loyal to their country. I thought it was fascinating and very well done.
Yeah, and there are sequences like towards the end where Tony Leung gives the impression of going, I've had enough of all this. When he's like, Watanabe, you were complaining that you're this clan when you're actually this clan. Like any of us are going to care, as far as we're concerned, you're all just Japanese invaders.
You just need to go, man. When he does that whole scene where just don't even come here.
where it's giving the impression that he's kind of digging his own grave somewhat.
Yes, yeah, right at the table. I'm thinking, is he doing what I think he's doing? Because he's pretty much
kind of giving up. But then you realize right at the end that this is all part of the long con, man. This is and he's kind of the sacrificial lamb, if you like. And it involves a bit of jail time, but it's worth it in the end.
And who doesn't like a long con? I mean, the Sting, going all the way back to the Sting, the long con. I also think of the game House of Games. The David Mamet movie. That has just the total long con in it, all the way to the end, where they've just reeled this woman in so much, and then at the end you're going, oh my god. I still remember the review for that movie, James, for House of Games, was, after you see this movie, you will not trust buying Girl Scout cookies from a Girl Scout.
You'd be like, what's really in these?
That's really, and so that and Hidden Blade, bring this back to Hidden Blade, the big long con in this really worked for me. The final scene with the reveal to the Japanese leader, when he tells him, no, leave your uniform on, because
that's it reminded me of the moment in Inglourious Bastards, at the end of Inglourious Bastards, when they've taken Christoph Waltz out into the forest, and Brad Pitt's kind of going, what bothers me? It bothers me that you're going to take this uniform off and you're going to go home and you're going to live the rest of your life and you're going to kiss your wife and go out to work. I don't want that to happen. And it's almost the exact same scene. But he goes a little further and actually kind of kills him in this one. But I thought all of that was great. But I do so love, you mentioned earlier, I do so love this setting.
Yes,
there are lots of great movies that sort of take place in Shanghai, which was such a sort of exotic, cosmopolitan, fractured city where there was so much going on. There was so much kind of crime and all these different sort of political and international parties side by side, all vying for sort of control and their little piece. And there's this other war going on outside the rest of the world, because obviously you've got the what's called the Second Sino-American War, or the War of Sino-Japanese War, or the War of Resistance against Japan, as it's called. Simultaneously, obviously, the Second World War is going on, around it, and there are people whose interests in one conflict over the other conflict, sort of vary. I like the fact that Watanabe is obsessed with Manchuria, and installing a puppet government there and keeping that province there, and all of these kind of other things. And it's just such a sort of exotic time. It must have been kind of, on the one hand, it's almost like it must have been sort of horrible, obviously, to live there, and you're living by your wits from moment to moment, but also it must have been incredibly exciting and seductive to kind of live in that city at that time as well. Right. And so it's no wonder that so many movies choose this setting and it's always for these really sort of complex tales of sort of double crossing and intrigue and yeah, these great sort of con movies essentially. And I liked that with the movie, that the title Hidden Blade, you know, has a couple of different meanings, because obviously the hidden blade is the double triple agent, right, you know, who has been operating under your nose the entire time. But also it can be referred to the communists, you know, who are hiding in the shadows, waiting for their moment. You know, they've had to kind of dial it back a bit while the war sort of picks up again, but they're waiting, and they're biding their time, and so they can be considered like a hidden blade. But also it just echoes the very phrasing of Cloak and Dagger. You know, Cloak and Dagger is essentially a hidden blade, and and it's just a sort of a doffing of its cap to this whole sort of subgenre of sort of wartime spy thrillers.
Yes.
And these secret rendezvous and what have you.
You know, spy thrillers have tended to be Western in the past, you know, Cold War, Soviet Union. And so it was great to see kind of that Cloak and Dagger scenario played out in this totally non-Western setting between Kuomintang, between communists, between Japanese, in this city of Shanghai, as you mentioned. And, you know, as somebody who's traveled to Shanghai many, many times, when I see the Bund, even in a movie like this, it's great whenever you can say, I've been there. I know, you know, in fact, I'll be there now. China's been, you know, the border's been closed for 3 years. I normally go there 2-3 times a year, and I'm already making plans to go up to Shanghai, probably late April, beginning of May. And, you know, like you said, Shanghai is just the perfect setting for a 1940s Cloak and Dagger type film. You always hear about Shanghai in the 30s and 40s, London in the 60s, Hong Kong in the 90s. These are quintessential time periods in these cities where things were just over the top. Everything was exuberant. There was such spectacle. And granted, I think maybe at this point Shanghai was starting to, because of the war, but it still had that. When I think of Shanghai in this time period, I just picture a lot of martinis.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, it's almost like sort of Berlin in the 30s. I mean, you kind of didn't want to be there.
Another good example.
Didn't want to be there, but
it was rock and rolling, you know.
Yeah, it was
Paris
swinging.
in the, you know, yeah,
it really was. It was really swinging, and I felt that the film did a good job of capturing all of that. And I think actually the production design of this movie is great. I mean, it's shot beautifully. And Cheng Er, his previous film, The Wasted Times, is another sort of thriller set in this time period as well. And that's a lot of sort of trench coats and fedoras, you know, tucked over their eyes. But that one didn't really work for me. That one was overly complicated and ended up just being a really sort of incoherent mess. I was slightly trepidatious coming to that. I was like, oh, he's having another crack at this kind of time period again. Okay, fine. But this one I felt, you know, with the reservations that I've said about the non-linear storytelling, I felt a far more coherent story. But it looks just like the older film did. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I think the sets, the different restaurants, you know, there's like the Hong Kong tea house that they get.
Yes.
Remember that scene at the end where he's eating like live shrimp?
Yes.
I was
trying to think what
I don't know
that
that
stuff
dish.
in Hong Kong. I haven't seen that one. No.
And you know,
I love the line where it talks about Kowloon Tong being the lively place. Like my office in Kowloon Tong. It's a nice area, but I wouldn't say, oh, that's the happening place in Hong Kong, you know?
No, nor would I. But I mean, there are the eateries in general in this movie made for incredible sort of settings, and there are a lot of conversations, and I think there was a lot of symbolism in the food. You know, that symbolism of him just like going at these like live shrimps, or the conversation that he has with his partner earlier on about ordering the ribs, and did we order the ribs, and did we have the ribs, and they make a joke out of it, which I've got to be honest, I didn't entirely get the joke, even though you see that scene sort of 2 or 3 times. But you know that there's this kind of sort of sick sense of humor at play, because essentially their job is to go out and execute people, you know, bring them in, interrogate them, execute them. But for me, the best setting in the movie is the interrogation room that's in the midst of this labyrinth of dog cages. it's like a dog dungeon.
Oh yeah.
You have to sort of go past all of
Mhm.
these barking dogs in all of these cages, and then right at the back there's a secret room where they have all of these really nasty interrogations, and you know that if you go into that room, you're not coming out of that room.
Coming out, yeah. Oh no, it's what humans could do to other humans. I struggle with torture. I struggle with man's inhumanity to man. When it goes into those areas, I'm like, it's rough for me. But Tony Leung, even as he's maturing as an actor, I just love watching this guy on film. He's just a mainstay, an icon of Hong Kong cinema, and just Tony Leung being in it immediately made me think I want to watch this film. And although it has a wonderful cast, it's a well-rounded cast. I could speak about everyone else. It was great to see Tony kind of leading the charge here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great performance by Tony Leung. I think it's a part that comes with a little bit of baggage for him, if you like, or rather it harks back to some of his, more famous roles. You've seen him play this kind of collaborator before, like Lust Caution. With Tang Wei, he's that kind of guy. I mean, it's set in Hong Kong, not in Shanghai, but he's the same kind of guy. He's the Chinese guy working for the Japanese, and the whole plot of that movie is to seduce him and take him down. Obviously, it doesn't go to plan. But then, of course, even things like sort of Infernal Affairs and Hard Boiled and movies like that, where he plays the undercover guy.
Yeah,
who it gives the appearance of a bad guy, but then of course isn't. I mean, and even recently in Shang-Chi, he's experimenting with the notion of being a bad guy, a villain, if you like, but one that is sympathetic, one that is morally complex, one that you can understand, if you like. And here I think he plays with all of that baggage that the audience brings to it, all of our preconceptions about the kind of part that he might be playing brilliantly. And so it tows you along right until the bitter end. You're like, so is he a bad guy, or is he the good guy, or is he the bad guy? And I think it does that well. And it does it with Wang Yibo's character as well.
Yes.
And I think the pair of them, going back and forth, where you always think, okay. Yeah. And then until the very end where you realize, they've been playing everybody.
Yeah, when Wang Yibo does the thing like boom, and he's like, they played that so well, and in hindsight, it makes it an even stronger film because now this makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a great payoff. As the movie goes on, like I said, you've really got to pay attention to it. It can be quite sort of challenging to follow at times. But then the payoff is totally worth it. Yeah. The final 5 or 10 minutes of that film is really, really good, really strong. Well, James, as we draw it to a close, we need an instrument of measurement. How are we going to review Hidden Blade? How many hidden blades? Is there? I always look for a sort of an inanimate object that was pivotal in it. How many live prawns in a bowl?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, James, we decided on how many live prawns in a bowl. How many live prawns in a bowl? I think they were prawns.
Yeah,
would you give Hidden
shrimps
Blade?
or little langoustines or something like that? I thought I really enjoyed this actually.
Yeah.
As I said, I'd seen some of the director's work before, and it had left me dissatisfied with his over-ambitious productions. And this really felt that for the most part, it found its feet, and it all sort of paid off. There's a lot of setup, but by the end, I think everything has been pretty well resolved. It looks gorgeous. The performances are strong. The cast is excellent, and the production design it is great. It's not perfect by any stretch, but it's rock solid. It's entertaining, and it has this wonderful sense of place and of period. So I'm going to give it 4 live prawns in a bowl out of 5.
Fantastic. I can pretty much echo everything you said. Cast is strong, setting strong. We talked about Shanghai, tone, Cloak and Dagger. The big reveal at the end was wonderful. I found myself a little more, I think, confused than you were at times, and a little frustrated during this. So because I can give a half, I'm going to just come down a little from you. I always say that 3 or above is a must-see for me. I can highly recommend anything 3 or higher. And I'm going to go even higher for this because it is a strong film. I enjoyed it, and I can highly recommend it but I'm going to let you do the 4. I'm going to do 3.5 live prawns in a bowl out of 5.
Sounds great. Okay, so what did you think about Hidden Blade? Have you had an opportunity to see it? Have you seen any of Cheng Er's other films? Tony Leung doing Tony Leung. Do we need to bring it up? Some of your favorite Tony Leung films will be always much appreciated.
Chungking Express.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other films set in Shanghai in the 1930s that you particularly like? I've seen a few. Are there any favorites that you recommend? I know there was a big, was it a TVB show called The Bund with Chow Yun-fat in it, I think.
Oh, I was not aware.
Maybe from the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
Am I right? Am I wrong? Please let me know.
Oh, they'll let you know. They'll let you know.
Please do let me know.
And by the way, we are on social media, James and I, so you can find our links to our Instagram and Twitter accounts in the description box below. As we mentioned, we'll leave a comment. We'd love to keep the dialogue going. Until next episode, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.